Good morning, everyone. Welcome in to Southeastern 14. It is January 11th, 2024. Woke up this morning and kind of woke up with a start and looked around and thought, was that a dream last night? Is Nick Saban really not the coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide any longer? Looked at the phone, just double checked everything, made sure, and sure enough, Nick Saban's era with the Crimson Tide is over with. It is, in fact, reality, and it is going to move very, very quickly in terms of a search for his replacement now that a 30-day window has opened up for Alabama Crimson Tide football players to be able to enter the transfer portal because of the retiring of Nick Saban. One of the few things that I think the NCAA actually does correct in allowing players to say, hey, a coach that I was committed to, somebody that I was in this building because of, has decided to move on with another step of his life, and now they get the opportunity to explore their options. I think that's actually a good thing that NCAA does. But Alabama now has to move quickly in order to find a replacement. And our friends at Bet Online are trying to tell you that there is some real momentum with Dan Lanning. Our friends out in the desert and also the people at Bet Online started off this coaching search with Dan Lanning as a plus 300 favorite, with Lane Kiffin right behind him at plus 500. Now that has shifted around, and Dan Lanning is a minus 175 favorite in terms of the betting odds to be Alabama's next head coach. Now, overnight, there were rumors of a flight from Oregon to Tuscaloosa. There were rumors that Dan Lanning was in Tuscaloosa. A news station in Oregon said they had confirmed that. That has been thus confirmed the other way, okay, saying that he was not in Tuscaloosa by insiders over at Duck Territory for Oregon and things like that. So conflicting reports there. It doesn't matter, guys, whether Dan Lanning was in Tuscaloosa or not. If Alabama knows that they want Dan Lanning, I don't care if the buyout's 20 million, 30 million, whatever. If he's the guy that they want, then Dan Lanning, okay, is going to be the guy. And we're going to tell you why after this word from our friends at Bet Online, guys. The only people that didn't take time off during the year, the only people that don't get an opportunity to just rest all the time, pro athletes, okay, and also Bet Online. Yeah, pro athletes always have to stay on top of their game, and so does Bet Online, especially with the Super Wildcard Weekend coming up for the NFL. The bowl season has come and gone. Now NBA is in full swing. Guys, Bet Online is not taking a second off. You can see even they're providing you up-to-date information on the Alabama coaching search. So you need to head on over to betonline.ag today for all the latest betting news, odds, trends, predictions, and information. BetOnline has all of your wagering info with both desktop and mobile access at any time. Head over to betonline.ag today and get into the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV, all caps BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Guys, the reason that Dan Lanning has momentum to be Alabama's next coach, and why I think he should be the next head coach for Alabama, is because this is a young man's game. You see Nick Saban at 72 years old hanging it up, saying, hey, there's a lot going on year after year at Alabama. I just said on Monday when we did a video on the DC vacancy that Nick Saban had at Alabama, I said, hey, eventually at some point in his life, he's going to get tired of saying, okay, now I got to replace a DC. Now I got to replace an outside linebackers and special teams coach. Now I got to replace this position. It just gets tiresome after a while, especially at 72 years old. You add that on top of NIL, transfer portal, high school recruiting, all that. It just eventually said, hey, I'm going to go enjoy that $17 million mansion that Miss Terry and I have down there in Florida, go enjoy my grandchild, stuff like that. But this game never stops. I mean, the recruiting never stops. Now you throw the transfer portal, the calendar that the NCAA and that college football has instituted is unsustainable, guys. And you need a young, hungry coach to be able to go after it. I think you're talking about Dan Lanning, who's 37 years old. I think, in comparison, the names that get thrown out there, right? The names under the Saban tree. Kirby Smart is the most preeminent one. He's in his late 40s. He's probably 47, and that seems like a night and day difference between where Dan Lanning is in terms of his energy, his zeal to move forward with college football, all this kind of stuff, and where Kirby even is right now. I've said for a long while that unless the college football calendar gets changed, I think you're going to see some guys get, maybe Kirby and them get into their mid 50s and say, hey, I'm done. I'm ready to be done with this. So I think you need a young guy. Dan Lanning is that. He's a guy who has worked at Alabama as a graduate assistant underneath both Kirby and Saban. And then he went to Memphis and became a defensive coordinator. And then Nick Saban was going to bring him back to Alabama, but a couple of days before he actually pulled the trigger on hiring Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart hired him to be the defensive coordinator from Georgia from 2018 to 2021, or was actually named the defensive coordinator, I believe, in 2019, worked for him as a outside linebackers coach in 2018. But after the 2021 season, that's when Dan Lanning takes the Oregon job. And in 2022, he took over a team that was in flux. That defense had to be rebuilt, all that kind of stuff. Guys, they went from 70-something in the country in total defense to 22nd in the country in total defense from 2022 to 2023 at Oregon. Their pass defense improved from like 102nd in the country, jumps up over half of those spots, guys, up into the top 50. And then their rush defense went from 31st in the country to 11th in the country just in 1 year. So you see that Dan Lanning has done a good job recruiting. You see that he has built a lot of buzz around that Oregon program. He helped resurrect the career of Bo Nix, went 22-5 during those 2 years at Oregon, and of course had an emphatic victory over Liberty in the Fiesta Bowl this past bowl season, just on January 1st. So Dan Lanning has a lot of experience in terms of being around a Nick Saban type system. He knows what it takes. He's seen greatness from the inside of that organization, from the inside of that coaching tree. He's now been able to branch out and do it his own way over on the West Coast. Now, I will say this. People say, hey, there's a $20 million buyout. Yes, there's a $20 million buyout, and the Red Elephant Club, the boosters for Alabama will make sure that money is there in a second. There's that is not an issue. The issue is, does Dan Lanning, once whatever type of interview, whether he does end up going in person to Tuscaloosa, whether it is a digital interview, whatever, when he is done with that and he sits down, and if that job is actually offered to him, he has to make that decision. Do I want to be the guy that follows the greatest coach of all time? Do I want to be the guy after the guy? And that is a tough deal, because one, you have to believe in yourself as a football player, as a football coach. I mean, there's egos involved that you have to have, not in a bad way, but you have to have a certain amount of ego and think that you're the best at your craft and that you can do better than everyone else in order to have the mindset that you need to accomplish things, while also understanding that everyone else is working as hard as you and being maniacal in your pursuit of perfection, your pursuit of doing every single thing the right way. That's what Nick Saban did. That's what Nick Saban did 100%. That's what Kirby Smart is doing at Georgia. And that's what the kind of the same cloth that Dan Lanning is cut from. So with these betting odds, these live betting odds, guys, it went from, I came down to record early this morning, got down here about 35 Eastern time. And before I hit record, a little bit before 6 o'clock Eastern time in this morning on January 11th, those odds had already went down from minus 130 to it went to minus 175. I'm telling you, Bet Online is thinking that Dan Lanning is going to be the guy, and there's lots of smoke and reports out there that corroborate that. Now, listen, we do not think that the rumor of him being in Tuscaloosa last night was true. Um, Other names, if this does fall through, let's say Dan Lanning goes through and he says, you know what, I don't know if that's the best career move to be the guy after the guy. If he does pass up on it, then I think you'll hear a name like Mike Norvell from Florida State. I think he'll be an option. Of course, Lane Kiffin is always an option out there, but I think ultimately, guys, Dan Lanning's going to end up with this job. He's certainly the heavy favorite right now, and he will be able to keep a lot of that recruiting momentum intact. He has won some big 5-star recruiting battles during his time there, been able to flip guys away from win some head-to-heads with Georgia, win some head-to-heads with Oklahoma, win some head-to-heads with USC. He's won a couple head-to-heads with Alabama. I mean, he's been able to win a lot of high-profile recruiting battles, and I think he would do an excellent job of keeping that roster intact if Alabama does indeed. It's been reported by Alabama Online and all these other outlets out there that Greg Byrne wants to have this done in a 72-hour window so that he keeps people from cherry picking the current roster there with that transfer portal window open. They've already lost the commitment of Ryan Williams in 2024, a guy who out of Saraland High School there in Alabama. He decommitted from Alabama after he had reclassified from the 2025 class to the 2024 class to commit to the Crimson Tide. He was going to sign with Alabama in February. Now he's in wait and see mode. I think Dan Lanning would do a good job of attracting him in. Now, listen, Dan Lanning also, in order to be a defensive genius and a powerful defensive mind, you have to know offense inside and out. So I don't think you have to worry about if Dan Lanning gets hired or if Alabama is going to have a dynamic offense underneath him, okay? Because I think he has proven at Oregon and proven what he's been able to do with Bo Nix and things like that, that they're going to have a dynamic offense. They're going to be physical in the run game. They're going to spread people out and be able to count the numbers in the box, all of those kind of things. The RPO game is going to be there. All of these staples of what Dan Lanning knows gives his defense trouble, he's going to bring on the offensive side of the ball. Same thing that both Saban and Smart have done at their location. So don't worry. I don't think you're going to, go backwards in terms of offensive style if Dan Lanning is the head coach. I do think you'll still have that toughness on defense. You'll have a great recruiter. You'll have a young guy who has a lot of energy, and that's why I think Dan Lanning ends up being the next head coach at Alabama. But like I said, if he's not, a name I would watch is Mike Norvell, Kalen DeBoer from Washington. The problem is, guys, it's just you look at all these resumes of these coaches and they just pale in comparison to what Nick Saban has done over his tremendous career. And everybody's is going to. Even if you brought up a name like a Dabo Swinney, who has beaten Nick Saban a couple of times in national championship games, his resume still pales in comparison to what Saban has done. There will never be another Nick Saban. There will never be anybody who does this to the level that he does in this absolute just meat grinder of a sport that is college football, and especially now with the calendar and things like that, NIL transfer portal. It's the ending of an era, and if Dan Lanning comes in, I think everybody's going to have to be patient, going to have to understand that there's going to be some adjustments. I don't think Alabama would fall off a cliff, but I think being in the playoff every single year, now with 12 team, probably more likely you can still get in the playoff every year, but winning national championships at the clip that Nick Saban did, I don't think anybody's ever going to do that again. The closest would be, what Kirby's able to do at Georgia right now. But other than that, guys, I think there's a ton of momentum. Bet Online has those odds trending towards Dan Lanning, and Guys, we're excited to be covering this. Make sure that you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Remember that we are presented by Bet Online, and you can get that 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit by using the information in the description below. We'll be right here to cover all of this as it breaks down. Tell us in the comments what you think is going to happen, what you think about it if Dan Lanning is indeed the next head coach for the Alabama Crimson Tide. For everyone at Southeastern 14, I am Blayne Gilmer, and we'll catch you guys next time to talk more Alabama and more SEC football right here on Southeastern 14.